Did I just kill the cliche of everyone thinking that? Hello my lovelies and welcome back to another video. Today's video is a highly requested one. Ever since I moved to Paris, you guys have asked me to compare London and Paris as cities. I guess I really could have done that before because you don't need to have such a long experience in one city in order to discuss these pros and cons, but I think that last 3 months have really helped me bring the final verdict and decide which city is better for living. And you will get very surprised. I will bring the final verdict at the end and explain my official opinion. I had to write everything down because honestly I didn't want to forget something, and I sat down thinking about it. I'm super curious to hear you guys' opinions, if you agree or if you disagree. And in fact, I even could compare this to living in Serbia as well, because as you guys know, I lived in Serbia for overall of 14 years, so I think I could give an opinion of what it's like living there as well. When it comes to Paris, one major advantage that Paris has over London is that everything is much more localized. I never spend more than 25 minutes getting from one end of Paris to the other. In the worst of the worst rush hours during Fashion Week, it would be like 40 minutes. But honestly, I never spend a lot of time in Paris traffic. It's very easy getting from one end of Paris to the other, where like of what you need to use. Whereas London, even when you compare kind of central London, to get from Shoreditch to Knightsbridge, it can be more than an hour, and this is something that I do not miss. When someone tells me that there's an event in Shoreditch and I'm in West End, I was always like, oh my god, like it's literally going to take me more than an hour to get there. Some parts of London, even though they're very popular and very central, they're not like suburbs. They're very hip areas, yet they take forever to get to. And as much as I love London, that is one thing that I don't miss now living in Paris. I can pretty much walk everywhere in Paris, and I find it that it's much easier to get from end to end. Paris is a lot smaller, I would think, when it comes to geography, but I think it's much more densely populated. One thing, however, that I certainly miss in London is customer service. Customer service in London is like nowhere else in the world. Not only that people in companies are very polite because their job is at stake and because they're offering the service, but also people are very nice on the street. You know, if you bump into someone in London, they will say, I'm sorry, even if it's your fault. If you step on someone's foot, they will say, I'm sorry, and you will say sorry as well. Whereas in Paris, it's a lot of like, a lot of, no. Sometimes I'm happy I don't understand French because I get people on the street that are just not very friendly, least to say. Also, I have to say in Paris, people push, you know, they're like, there's no queue system. In England, queue is everything. People queue even to get into a bus. Like, so you queue up on a bus stop, and when the bus arrives, you go in the order of how you arrived at the bus stop, which I think is actually fair. In Paris, there's no queue. I was actually once in a situation at the airport. I was on the phone, I was in the queue. I respect queue. Queue is very important to me. And someone like pushed me out of the way and was like, queue is that way. And I was like, but no, I'm standing in the queue, I'm behind this person here. And the person tried to have an argument with me about them being in front of me at the queue. I want to say that customer service is much better in England, meaning that if there is a problem with your package in post, if there's a problem with any kind of service you receive, they will take it much more seriously than they would in Paris. I find it that in France, if you don't like something, like for example, if you're not happy with the service that you're receiving, you enter a restaurant and you sit down. I saw this in a sketch and I think it's so true. You sit down in a restaurant and you're like, can I have a menu? And the waiter is like, menu? Menu? You know, it's like, yes, I need a menu. I need to see what you have in this restaurant, because otherwise how am I supposed to guess what do you serve? So it can get a little bit frustrating when it comes to customer service. One thing that drives me mad is if I don't like something, they're like, well, this is France. This is how we do it in France. You know, this can be a little bit frustrating, but I also have to say shopping experience has been exceptional in France for me, always. I've always had really great customer service shopping here. It's mainly bureaucracy that can be very frustrating in France, which is completely not the case in England. Comparing that, I could compare that to Serbia as well. I think customer service in Serbia is terrible, especially because I lived in England from 18 to 31. You can imagine that I kind of grew up used to a great customer service. I go to post office, you know, I go to the bank, and I receive great customer service in England. Then I go to Serbia. I remember I was paying in this actually money for charity in post. And I was asking for a pen because you have to fill like such a form to pay. And I asked for a pen in post office. So I queued for like 20 minutes in like a big post. And then I got a paper. She's like, you didn't fill in the form? You didn't fill in the form? I was like, no, I didn't fill in the form. And then she gave me the form and I said, could I please borrow your pen? She's like, no, I don't give you my pen. Of course not. Go and buy a pen. So I had to leave the post office in Serbia, buy a pen at the kiosk, queue up again 30 minutes to fill out the form to pay for it. Customer service in England is the king. Literally the best customer service, hands down. This is the first time that I'm wearing this top and I really love it. I'll link it below. I think it's beautiful. It's a silk top, but maybe it's like eats me up. I don't know when I'm filming. You guys let me know in the comments below. One thing that I actually really like in Paris is water. I might be wrong, it might be just my personal perception, but water in Paris is keeping my skin really great. I think the water in London is really hard, and I believe that people are saying that it's very hard in Paris as well, which means that it's full of calcium salts. In all honesty, I think ever since I arrived in Paris, my skin has never looked better. Maybe not right now because I just returned from holidays, or not just, but you know what I mean. However, water in Paris has been really great for me and for my skin, and I really like it. Also, like, water in Serbia is much better for me. London water is the worst water for my skin. Never in my life had a spot until the day that I moved to England, which for me was the most shocking thing. Even after traveling in January and February for 2 months, I returned to England, I think like beginning of March, and my skin immediately worsened. Like, it's crazy how bad water is in England. But one thing that I absolutely love in England is that I feel extremely safe. I guess there is still crime in London, like in every big city of the world, but ever since I moved to Paris, I had a lot of people telling me, do not carry your phone in your hand because someone might snatch it out. Do not leave your bag just anywhere. Be very careful about what you carry. Paris is very dangerous. Things can happen. It's making me very conscious about spending time outside. Even when I'm eating outside, like this morning I had lunch in like outside, and there was a street, you know, like traffic next to me, and I was like I was holding my phone, my camera, my bag, everything in my lap while I was eating, because they're saying that literally pickpockets are everywhere. People snatch your phone out of your hand, they steal bags, everything goes missing. I have a lot of friends who were robbed in Paris. So as you guys know, in 13 years of living in England, I've never had one package missing, and ever since I arrived in Paris, in the last 3 months, I had 3 packages stolen from me already in the building. I've had so many times that I was feeling quite unsafe and wanting to leave a place because I just, you know, didn't know. There's a lot of begging and organized crime in Paris. Yeah, you just have to be much more careful than you do in London. One thing though that I love in Paris is the cafe culture. This is something that really reminds me to back home. We have a cafe culture, and when I moved to England, this is something that I miss the most. So in England you will have pubs, but I find pubs to be very male dominated places, and it's just not a place where you want to sit outdoors. There's no place where you can sit outdoors in England. I understand that they blame it on weather, but if you compare London and Paris, actually rains more in Paris than in London in a year, believe it or not. Did I just kill the cliche of everyone thinking that London is the rainiest city in the world? I don't know, but it rains more in Paris than in London. The thing is that there's a lot more cafes outdoors in Paris, and in winter, in summer, in no matter what weather condition, there is a cafe in Paris. Outdoor heating exists, people are sitting outside, they're enjoying their life, they're having a glass of wine, and that's something that I really love in Paris. I would say that it's very similar in Serbia. We like to go to a cafe, to eat food, to sit outdoors, to enjoy life, to sit for 3-4 hours. If you want to go for a coffee in London, it's like Starbucks, Pret, maybe an independent coffee shop, but the feeling is just not the same. It's not the same as the cafe culture that there is in Paris. I also find that people are socializing a little bit more in Paris. Like after work socializing is a thing, whereas in London it would be a pub o'clock, a pint after work or something like that. Everything is very rushed. And also in London, when you make plans with your friends, you kind of do like, okay, what are you doing 3rd week of September? You know, whereas in Paris, you're like, hey, are you free tomorrow after work? Maybe it's just a Corona thing. Now, a disclaimer, I am not from London or from Paris, so I'm just judging as an expat. And honestly, I love both cities, so I'm not hating on anything, and my opinions might not be correct, but this is just the experience I've had so far, because in all honesty, it could be also that it's very different now post-corona, but this is my so far experience. People are a little bit more available. One very important thing I would say is commuting. Whether it's taxi, underground, whether it's a bus, pretty much any type of commuting, London is much better. So when you compare underground in London to underground in Paris, underground in London is much easier to use. It's extremely simple. It's much cleaner. It does not smell terrible like it does in Paris, and the system of going underground is a lot easier in London. You can even pay with your credit card, so all you need to have is a contactless card. You tap in and you go and you tap out wherever you arrive, and it will charge you for the destination that you traveled, and it will always calculate the smallest. So if you use like several times in a day, it will charge you like a daily ticket. If you're using it several times a week, it will charge you a weekly ticket, etc. We obviously have also Oyster. They have something called Navigo, Navigo, I don't know. It's Navigo in Paris. It's not as good because there's some issues of charging it from first to first. I don't know, I haven't really had the chance to experience it a lot. I've just been asking around, but I believe that underground in London is way better because I've only taken underground in Paris a few times, and out of the few times, one time I saw someone stole someone else's bag. So there was like spitting involved. It was very intense, and I was like, maybe not. When it comes to taxis, oh my god, how much I missed the small talk in taxis in London, like where are you going? Every time I would make a new story, like, you know, every time I would say I'm doing a different thing in London, I would always play a tourist card. Like, it's amazing. The cab drivers in London, guys, they know every street in London because they have to pass a special test. I've spoken to so many taxi drivers about this test. So in London, you have to drive for like 3 years before you can pass the knowledge test. And that knowledge test means that you have to know every single street in London perfectly. They know when the streets are closed. They know everything. You know, you get in a taxi and you're like, I need to get to, like, I don't know, listen that street, like a random little dead end street. They will know it. I live in a very prominent street in Paris, very central area in the first arrondissement, and every time I say the name of my street, taxi drivers don't know it. It's always a mission. Then when we arrive there, can I pay with a card? No, they charge you 5 euros more to pay with a card. There's an issue, the card machine doesn't work, they huff and puff. Remember the all of this goes ahead when I ask to pay with a card because I haven't got cash on me on that occasion, and it's not the case in London. I actually always tip taxi drivers in London because I feel like, okay, if I'm paying with card and I'm not giving them cash, I really like to tip them. But in all honesty, like, they never complain about me paying with a card, whereas in Paris, it's always a drama. Always. Buses, I mean, buses in London are iconic. Even if you don't need to take a bus, you will, because you want to do it for the pure joy of taking a bus in London, a double-decker, go on top, sit in front. It's just joy. And honestly, London buses are insane. So when it comes to commuting, London versus Paris, London wins 10 out of 10 times. Aesthetics, Paris absolutely wins. No matter where in Paris you are, all you need to do is leave your house and you're in the most beautiful, insane area. Like, I mean, the building, like you see a chateau and you're like, oh my god, what is this? Like, what is this building? And they're like, oh, it's just an office of Air France, you know, like the most normal thing. Paris is so beautiful, that is insane. And I read this comparison, it's so true. Comparing Paris and London is like comparing a beautiful girl and not so beautiful girl. You know, the not so beautiful one has so much more personality and charm, and the very beautiful one is usually, it really is the truth. You know, Paris is so much prettier than London. London has those kind of townhouses and the beautiful buildings in certain areas, but Paris is just another level. Paris has so much more because actually Paris was not completely destroyed during the war. London was bombed, so a lot of things were destroyed, but here we have Louvre, we have obviously the Eiffel Tower and stuff like that, Moulin Rouge, we have Sacré-Cœur, like Montmartre, like old buildings. You can see so much. I don't know how long you need to live here, how much time you have to spend here in order to experience it all, whereas London has a lot, but a lot of it has been rebuilt, so not everything is as old as it is in Paris. Paris has so many beautiful buildings, but London has the personality, the charm, the hipster culture, the cool vibe, and it's very different, I would say. Then we go to cleanliness. Yes, Paris is prettier, but it's a lot dirtier than London. I feel that the general smell of the cities can be compared. Is that too much info? I rarely ever experienced really terrible smell in London like I have in Paris. I also think that when it comes to rubbish and when it comes to little things, London level is really high. The cleanliness is really high, and it's something that I think is very important. Fashion. This will cause a lot of drama, but Paris fashion is something that cannot be compared, and I think is on so much higher level than London fashion. I agree, some people will say like, well, it depends on your personal style, it depends on your taste, some of the London designers are so cool, and I agree with all of that, but London is like garage style, you know, it's very cool, it's very urban, it's just not me. So for me, Paris style, the whole like coolness, the je ne sais quoi, cliche, is on another level. And honestly, I'm not a smoker, but just seeing a girl in the black skinny jeans and white t-shirt smoking outside of a cafe looks completely different than it does in London. Like the level of coolness and fashion is incredible here. It's crazy, and it's something that I just have to mention, because also, what do we have in London when it comes to brands? What do we have in Paris? We have Louis Vuitton, we have Dior, we have Chanel, we have Hermes, we have so much. Like, there's basically a never-ending sea of brands, some of which are my favorites, like Saint Laurent or Celine, or, you know, this never-ending array of incredible brands in Paris, and the history and the culture of them. One thing that I think London cannot be beaten at is health system. Now, NHS gives pretty much everybody in European Union free health service, and this is something that France, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't have. I am yet to really understand the health system in France. I don't know really how it works, but all you need in England is an address and the European Union passport, and you have rights like English people for free doctor's appointments, free treatments, and even the medication is free in most of the cases, and when it's not free you pay very small participation fee. England and the healthcare system is something that cannot be replicated in any other country of the world. I just hope that they preserve it and they keep it in that way, because I do believe in our NHS in England, and I think it's really the best healthcare system in Europe. I think that's something very important if you're ever thinking about going to live somewhere. And last but not the least is the language. I clearly do not speak French, which is not helping.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Will I learn? I might try. I don't know. It depends how long I decide to stay in Paris. I'm already understanding much more than I did when I just arrived here. It's a minus for me that I don't speak the language in Paris, but I do in London. Am I able to get by? Absolutely. Absolutely able to get by with a smile, even when they're unfriendly. If you try a little bit or you Google Translate stuff, you can do a lot in Paris even without speaking French. I think it's a big cliche. They're probably much nicer to you when you can speak French, but even a little bit of a smile, Google Translate, and English can get you by. So far, I never had an issue where I just was hitting a wall because of not speaking French. So. Yes, one more important thing actually. When it comes to life expense, I think for housing, London is more expensive than Paris. For life and enjoying life, Paris is more expensive than London. But overall, it probably comes to the same. I do believe that London gives more opportunities, so at the end you have more chances on becoming rich in London than in Paris. But that is also actually backed up by the fact that London has like 3 times more billionaires than Paris does. Taxes are also much higher in Paris than in London, which subsequently makes sense. Overall, when you put everything together, it turns to me that London is a better place to live in than Paris. And again, you're wondering, why, Tamara, would you want to live in a city where you clearly don't think is better than in the other, like in the city where you came from? And this is a very good question. I ask myself the same every day. I just believe that being relatively young woman and having an opportunity to live in this city, I cannot say no to it. I want to jump to every opportunity that comes my way to try something different, and currently I'm really enjoying living in Paris, no matter the pros and cons. Sometimes pros and cons are not just the only way and the best way for making a decision. So my big rule and thing in life is to follow my heart and not just to follow what on paper seems like a good decision, a pro or a con to something. So at the moment I'm really enjoying spending my time in Paris, and then who knows what the future brings. I will for sure enjoy commuting between London and Paris because London will forever remain my primary address. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys!